Hey everybody, it's Mr. Sean. I'm out in my yard today getting rid of what many people consider to be a weed growing in their yard, but it's actually one of my favorite flowers, and that is the dandelion. They are all over the place, but something you can do with dandelions is actually cook them. They are very edible. They're really high in vitamin A and vitamin C, and they're a great source of iron. They used to be eaten all of the time, and it wasn't until probably the 20th century that they really took on this stigma of being a weed. They originated in Europe, where they then spread across the globe and were often planted on purpose to be that source of food in tough times. Now, every part of the dandelion is edible, from the stem, the leaves, the roots, and the flowers. My favorite part is the flower. I feel it tastes like a sweeter green bean. The younger leaves are also very sweet, and when they get older, they're a little more bitter, but they are still very good when you cook them with oil and salt. Just like all vegetables taste extremely good when you cook them with oil and salt. There's nothing that doesn't taste good when you cook it with oil and salt, except for maybe a sponge. The seeds of the dandelion grow with a fluffy white parachute on top, which will carry them across the ground when it gets windy out. Now, it just rained yesterday, so we can see where these seeds have landed. And we can see how they spread all over the place to cause these flowers to bloom across the entire yard. Now, the dandelion is considered a weed in most places because it does take away from the aesthetic of a perfect green lawn. I don't really like the aesthetic of a perfect green lawn. I prefer a lawn with lots of color to it, more flowers, lots of native plants. But I do understand why people prefer the perfect green lawn. So if you are looking to get rid of your dandelions and you don't feel like cooking them up, it is recommended that you let your grass grow to over 3 inches. Let that grass outshade the dandelions, let the grasses around it stop it from growing, and then mow your lawn. Rather than using an herbicide, which is going to affect not just your lawn, but anything down the line in the water cycle, as most of that herbicide is going to get washed off in the next rain and then flow into our waterways, and it can affect lots of different places. Now, when you go out to collect dandelions, make sure you're only taking them from places like your yard. You don't want to take them from urban areas or next to roadsides where they've absorbed pollution from things like cars, or areas that may have had pesticides, herbicides, or fertilizers sprayed, because you don't want to end up eating that either. So this is very important. Only take the dandelions growing out of your yard, and only if they have not been sprayed with any pesticides, herbicides, or fertilizers. Now, before we get to cooking these dandelions, the most important thing with any sort of wild edible plant is that you are able to identify it perfectly. You cannot be 99% sure what you hold in your hand is what you think it is, and then put that thing in your mouth. Now, the key identifier for a dandelion is that serrated leaf and the flower, but a more important thing is the stem. Now, the stem of a dandelion is hollow, and it's usually going to be a reddish color as it gets older, because there are flowers out there that look similar to a dandelion, but their stem is solid all the way through, very woody, and tends to stay green. That flower itself also usually grows much taller than a dandelion, but it also has similar leaves. So make sure you check the stem of the dandelion to make sure it is hollow before you decide that it is a dandelion. Here we have a dandelion I cut the stem of, and you can see it is hollow all the way through. So that is the key identifier we want to use to make sure we know what we are eating is absolutely a dandelion. So after you've picked your dandelions, make sure that you do wash them off, get any of that dirt, any bugs that were crawling on them off of the flower, and then leave them to dry. You could also pat them dry, but I'm just going to leave these because it's a lot easier for me. Now, I'm making fritters out of these today. So that's just a simple batter and then fried in oil. But something that you can also do with these is add them to a salad. So if you are making fritters out of your dandelions, make sure that you take some of that stem off because it's a little more bitter than the rest of the flower. But don't take it all the way off, otherwise the petals are going to separate from the flower and they're going to get loose, and then you don't really have a solid chunk of something to make the fritter out of. But if you were putting these into a salad, it is a great idea to take the petals off by trimming that stem and letting the petals be separate, because then it makes a beautiful color into your salad, and it's a lot nicer than getting a whole hunk of the flower. You can eat a whole hunk of the flower, but it's a little nicer to have it spread out amongst the other leafy greens. So now that I've got my camping cooktop all set up, I have my burner on with a skillet with a bit of oil in it. I have my pot with my batter in it, and the dandelions are ready to go. So all that I gotta do is dip the dandelions into the batter and then place them in the oil. Now, since it is cornbread batter that I'm using, it does mean that there's quite a bit of sugar in the batter. That's just sugar coming from the corn itself, but it also means that these can burn pretty quick. I like them better with the corn mix, but it does require you be a lot more careful in your cooking and make sure you flip them pretty early on so that it doesn't burn right away. I'm just putting a little oil over top to help cook the top again. It does not take long. Just like that. We have it done. Here we have our dandelion fritters all done and ready to go. I've just added a little chive on top. They are delicious. They're crunchy on the outside, a little soft on the inside. They're kind of sweet. It's definitely that dandelion flavor coming through. Now, if you give these a shot, go ahead and share a photo of them when they're all finished up. Or if you do any other cooking with dandelions, please share that with us, because we're hoping to do more of these types of videos in the future. My personal favorite, aside from the dandelions, as far as wild edibles go, is wood sorrel, and it's starting to grow really well around here. So let us know if you want to see more of these types of videos in the future as well, and we will see you on another day.